Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. We are here live with you today, and we have a very special guest today. My guest today is Heidi Solomon-Orlick. Hope I'm saying that correctly.
You are. Thank you.
And Heidi is founder and CEO of an organization called GirlzWhoSell, which, of course, I love. And this is an organization whose mission it is to close the gender gap in B2B sales and build the largest pipeline of early stage diverse female sales talent, a story that I love so much. So today we are going to chat with Heidi about getting others on board your mission and movement and how she has been able to do that with GirlzWhoSell. As always, don't forget, you can pop your questions into the chat and we will answer them here as we go. Please, any and all questions, pop them right in there. So welcome everybody to Backstage at Speaking Your Brand, and welcome Heidi to Backstage at Speaking Your Brand.
Thank you so much, Diane. I'm really excited about the conversation and could spend all day talking about branding. So.
Well, that's good when you run an organization.
Subject. Only second to talking about how to get more women into sales. So.
Yes, good. Well, so take a moment, Heidi, if you would, and I gave a brief introduction, but if you would just give us a little bit more insight into who you are and what you do with GirlzWhoSell.
Yeah, so I started my career out of college, actually before I graduated, in marketing and direct marketing and advertising. I was living in California, grew up in California, and so worked in the advertising agency business for about 10 years, was fast-tracked, but had the opportunity to work and be mentored by Mary Wells, who was CEO of Wells, Rich & Green, and she was one of the only female CEOs. This is going back 100 years ago, but I don't want to exactly show my age, but she was definitely one of the only female CEOs out there. So I was incredibly blessed to do that. But after 10 years of getting fast-tracked and, you may know a bit about the ad agency business, it's easy to burn out. I, wanted to make a career change, and I really had absolutely zero idea of what I was going to do. And I ended up bumping into someone who I hadn't seen for many, many years. He had dropped out of college and had started a telemarketing company. We bumped into each other at lunch, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "My life is pretty much falling apart and I don't really know where I'm going, what my next step is." And he said, "Awesome, come and work for me as our vice president of sales." And
wow.
So I definitely fell into sales. It was, and B2B sales, but that was over 30 years ago. And, fast forward 30 years and it's still very, very male dominated industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's really my story, just in terms of background. I've probably closed well over $1 billion in revenue for the companies that I've worked for. I've created thousands of jobs around the world. And I've always been somebody that focused on mentoring and sponsoring and trying to change, trying to help other young women on their journey into sales or into sales leadership, because there weren't a lot of female role models when I was really progressing through my journey. And then I like to also consider myself sort of the diversity, equity, and inclusion champion, even before it was like a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a box to check. But I had always done it within the context of the organizations that I had worked for. And after going through a really traumatic period in 2019 with the death of both of my parents, which really caused me to take a step back and start thinking about my life and my legacy and really what kind of impact I wanted to have on the world, I was giving a lot of thought to how do I take my expertise in business to business sales and my passion for working with young women, right? And combine it, into an organization, or actually I'd like to think of Girls Who Sell more than a company. We're trying to create a movement, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that was it. I mean, I don't know if you want me to go into more background of how it actually happened.
Moment. That's why, I do. And I'm curious because you mentioned you kind of fell into sales. I'm just curious, do you find that most women specifically fall into sales, or do you feel like it's a deliberate career choice, or what is your sense of that?
Yeah, I will tell you that of the hundreds of women that we have interviewed, as a part of the launch of Girls Who Sell, we found that I would say a great majority of them fell into sales. I kind of joke, when you ask a young girl or little girl what they want to be when they grow up, no young girl says, I want to be in B2B sales, right?
Right. That's not one of the things.
No girl ever. Right. So I do find, and I think that the issue is, and that's one of the things that we're trying to tackle, is that there's a really negative perception of what sales is. A lot of times women and young men, to be quite frank, don't really even know that B2B sales is a viable career profession, right? There's not a lot of colleges that teach sales. It's changing slowly. But typically it might be a class that's taught, under the marketing major or under the business major.
Right.
But, it's only recently that colleges have seen the advantage of actually creating, sales certification programs or even sales majors, right?
Yes.
And so I think most people fall into it. Or they have someone that, that like I did, that they meet, that they go in and interview for one position and they say, what, have you ever considered a career in sales? And I go, sales? No, not me. I would never do sales. Or the other thing that we do a lot of focus on is a lot of women say, well, no, sales is not for me because I don't have the personality for it, right? And so, it's like, what kind of personality do you think you need to have, right? And so it's changing the perception from this thought of you have to sell something to really it's about serving, right? And it's about solutioning, and it's about consulting. And then young women say, oh, well, I can do that, right? That's kind of cool.
So it sounds like it's not just your organization, Girls Who Sell, is not just about getting girls excited about sales, but it's also helping to educate kind of everybody about sales is not necessarily what you think it is. It's something else, and which then helps to facilitate possibly more girls wanting to be in sales.
That's right. So we do, I like to think of it almost as a full spectrum of educating women on young women. And we intentionally, by the way, focus on young women because there's a lot of organizations that are doing a great job of working with women who are already in sales. Right. Lauren Bailey, right? Like she's amazing, right? And her organization Factor 8 and Girls Club, are working with women who are in sales, and she's training them and giving them the skill set to go from maybe an individual contributor role to a sales leadership role, right? So she's focused on career progression, and there's a lot of other companies that are doing a great job at that. Where I saw the gap is in getting younger, right? And as we began to speak with organizations, realized that there is a major pipeline issue. There just is. And so where we're focusing initially, our sweet spot is working with high school and college age students. And I've even been encouraged to get younger 10 to 13-year-old young girls saying, hey, you sales is really a viable, viable career choice.
Sure.
And, through Girls Who Sell Academy, our hashtag Explore Sales program is talking about, well, what is B2B sales? How does that differ from business B2C sales, right? What are the job opportunities? What kind of skill set? We focus on confidence. We tackle imposter syndrome. We allow them to talk to other women who are in the career, so that they can really learn more about what they can expect when they enter into a career in sales. So yeah, I think it has to start there. It has to start with education.
Sure.
And breaking, sort of busting up
Right.
this of
preconceptions and
the preconceptions of it's a used car salesman, or
yes,
you got to go sell,
right.
cell phone service, at Verizon. Not that there's anything wrong with
But it's more than that,
any
right?
of those, but it's much more than that.
Well, and you mentioned hashtags, which I want to get to in a minute, because we want to get to, I want to dive kind of deep into like, how have you've built quite a lot of momentum around this idea of Girls Who Sell. So I want to get to that. But first, I'm curious, I was looking at your website and I see that you structured your business around this idea of sponsorships. So can you tell us a little bit about that and why you chose that, and how does that help you to kind of grow this, not just your business, but this movement? How does that support that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, and actually sponsorships, I would say, is one pillar of the business. And also I'll talk a little bit about, when we thought about branding. First of all, looking at the website, it was really interesting because I felt like I had to straddle or move back and forth between a couple of different worlds, right?
Okay.
One is I needed to make the website appealing to the girls that we want to attract, right? But at the same time, we needed to appear professional and as a viable company that a organization would want to invest in, right? And allocate sponsorship dollars to. So we spent a lot of time from a branding perspective, thinking through that, right? So that we could talk to both audiences. So that's the first thing that we wanted to think through. The second thing is, of course, how do you generate revenue, right? And so for us, although we do now have a nonprofit foundation, and you might find it interesting that was born out of the fact that we were having conversations with a lot of organizations that were like, we love your mission. We are all about diversity, hiring, and equity, and bringing more women into the sales force, absolutely 100%. But we don't always, allocate dollars to companies that are not nonprofits, right? That are for-profit companies. So anyone who's out there listening that may be looking at a sponsorship model, that's something you need to take into consideration. So we solved for that. We created a nonprofit.
So do your sponsors' dollars support the nonprofit organization itself?
They can create scholarships. So there's two different options. They can either become a corporate sponsor, which gets them a whole host of different things. And we've got different sponsorship levels. So they get, because we're doing also career placement, we're building pipelines, we're doing mentoring, we have Girls Who Sell Academy, so they can get access to the training platform. They get other, obviously, marketing exposure, and guess what? They're doing the right thing, right? Because diversity is good for business. So from a public relations perspective, it's actually really good for them to sponsor Girls Who Sell, right?
Yeah.
But if they and those monies are generally allocated out of marketing budgets, just so you know,
Yes.
right? Whereas, you know, from a nonprofit, what we're doing, and the difference is, even though we share the two companies, the Girls Who Sell and Girls Who Sell Empowerment Fund, have similar missions in terms of trying to close the gender gap in B2B sales and build the largest pipeline of diverse early stage female sales talent. What we're doing is creating scholarship opportunities for young women from traditionally underserved and underrepresented communities. And those dollars can be utilized outside of the Girls Who Sell framework, right?
Okay.
So, so scholarships may be used for Girls Who Sell Academy, but, you know, there's a lot of great training programs or colleges or universities, or, you know, that we could generate scholarship money for and then allocate it out. So that's what we're doing. So so sponsorship and scholarships are one area, but we're looking to monetize, you know, other areas as well. Obviously, Girls Who Sell Academy. At some point, it's a virtual online learning platform. I did that intentionally because it gives me the ability. Well, one, it was born out of COVID, so face-to-face was not a thing. So I had to think of how to do something differently and in a virtual environment. But it also gives me the ability to be able to scale on a global basis. So we will, So we will be selling, you know, a couple of different training programs, starting with the hashtag Explore Sales, which is more of a lead magnet, which the intent of that is to say, hey, you know, let us educate you on what sales is, give you the opportunity to opt in or opt out. If you may go through that training program and decide, you know what, sales isn't for me, and that's okay. Right? It's important to know what you want as what you don't want, right? It's kind of like dating. Gotta date, you know? So, but true, right? But what we're hoping is more people go, you know, more young women go through that and say, hey, sales is pretty cool. So we want to go to the next level of the training program, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're also creating an app. This is early stage, pretty confidential, but it's going to be neat. It's going to be for, you know, career placement and mentor matching and stuff. It'll be free to, you know, anyone who's looking for a job, particularly early stage career professionals, you know, and young women who want to enter a career in sales. But we'll also have the ability to generate revenue through, you know, advertising and through sponsorships there and those kinds of things. And then the long-term goal, I mean, the super big vision is eventually we're going to get back to normal. I mean, it'll never be normal. It'll never be the same.
Post-COVID,
Post-COVID. You know, we'll at least maybe get back to doing some face-to-face, you know, it's starting to happen. I think over the next, you know, year or so, you're going to see a lot more. And then the goal is to do, you know, summer camps and personal kind of things, and to potentially license the Girls Who Sell curriculum and put other young women other women into business.
Well, so Heidi, let's talk about that, because isn't October Women in Sales Month?
It is Women in Sales Month. So
obviously you've talked about multiple things, multiple layers that have helped you build a movement. So as you mentioned, it's not just a company, it's a movement.
Right.
But I think that just illustrates the fact that it's not just one thing, it's these different layers, right? You've got the for-profit, you've got the academy, you know, the nonprofit, then you've got sponsors who are helping to support those efforts. Then you've got this coming app, and then the in-person things. But you've also used hashtags very creatively, because I noticed you had some posts around this hashtag why I sell.
Yes.
Yes. So give us a little insight into, first of all, let me just say that I've noticed, especially on LinkedIn, I haven't checked you out as much on Instagram, but on LinkedIn, I'm on there all the time. You are extremely effective at using LinkedIn. And I've noticed you using these hashtags, which are about kind of building the movement and letting other people help you build that as well. So give us a little insight into how you've used those, how they've helped you to build more momentum and more people helping get the message out about your brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think hashtags are great, right? But they're also cool, and
Right.
our girls, our constituent
Yes.
group. When you think of girls, the girls that we're appealing to. So I kind of like to think of pillars or constituent groups of who I'm talking to, and
Yes.
even though our branding has to be consistent, and we need to, the mission never changed, the vision never changes, but maybe the language changes a little bit depending on who our audience is, right? So the other thing you may have noticed is I am really not the face of the brand, and I did that intentional because, one, I'm a 62-year-old white woman, and I'm trying to attract young women, 15, 16-year-old to, let's say, 25-year-old, and it's probably 18 to 25. That's that sweet spot for us. And, I mean, I think I'm kind of cool, but my kids tell me I'm totally square. So, so the reason I bring that up is because I also want my brand to live beyond me.
Sure, yes.
It's about creating a movement. It can't be about me.
Right? That's such a great point.
Yeah. The other thing is it's when using hashtags, back to that question, there's 3 different hashtags that I use. Hashtag why I sell, which was actually released for October for Women in Sales Month. And that was about amplifying the voices of women in sales.
Yes.
So again, I didn't want to I shared my video, but I didn't want this to be about me, to be honest. It's not about me. It's about everybody else from my perspective. Right. So let me empower other women to be out there and sharing their stories and their journeys and their lessons and their why, right? Like why they got into sales. Because what better way to motivate other young women to get into sales than hearing the stories of other women who are doing it.
Yes.
And sales is storytelling, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's it. The other biggie was, the hashtag sell like a girl. And we actually trademarked that. And,
great.
And so that, and we trademark changing the face of sales. So, but sell like a girl, it's interesting because I've gotten some negative pushback, to be honest. When we came back, when I came out with Girls Who Sell and even the hashtag sell like a girl, because I think being a girl or using the word girl does have some negative perspective, particularly among women. I listened to it. I heard it. But there are a lot of organizations that focus on initiatives that are directed towards girls. And so I just leaned into it and I thought, you know what, I can either shy away from it and run from the people that, have an issue with it, or I can lean into it and just say, so I created a whole hashtag around it.
I think it shows you too that you've maybe touched on something that's touched on a nerve, right? And I think this idea of doing anything, quote unquote, like a girl has a place in our vernacular because as women, grown women, we have heard that as girls, right? Oh, you throw like a girl, or oh, you do this like a. So I think it's a play on that makes it. Not that there isn't a negative side to it, but I think it makes it an effective tool because we can all identify with that we have done so. And I think by using it as sell like a girl, you've turned it into a positive. So in my mind, it's okay. So
thank you. I'm glad you support it.
But I think also,
and I don't want you to think that I don't listen, because I'm all about taking input, right?
But it builds community around that expression, I think, for sure.
I think so too.
Conversation, right?
In fact, we did a whole video in our Explore Sales program about what it means to sell like a girl.
Oh, I love that.
And just own it, own that. Absolutely. And there's also some benefits being a girl-focused organization, especially with the nonprofit, because, the United Nations has funding and grants and everything around girls. So, there's Girls Inc. and there's Girl Scouts. And
isn't it
when did girls suddenly become a negative thing?
Yeah, it's International Day of the Girl, I believe, isn't it?
Today is International Day of the Girl.
There we go. Yeah, so that's right. Well, now, Heidi, you also have an advisory board.
I do.
Right. So tell me a little bit about how the advisory board came to be, and how do you think that has helped to support this as, again, not being just a company, but being more of a movement? How has the advisory board been a part of that?
I think it's having an advisory board, particularly as an early stage startup, is absolutely critical. It is, they're my sounding board. We have, there's a handful that I have weekly meetings with, talk about what we're doing, get their feedback, show them things, brainstorm on ideas, and then others, that may not be as involved on a weekly basis, but are there for me if I need them. And the way I approached it was, well, one, I went to my community, right, and my network of individuals that I knew, but I didn't want. I was very intentional about putting a diverse advisory board together.
Nice.
So when you look at our advisory board, there's men and there's women, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's women like me who are in their 60s. There's millennials. There's baby boom. There's Gen Zers. I created an ambassador network.
Tell me about that.
Of young women, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So who, at the end of the day, I don't want to create a company or content or a branding or marketing strategy without getting direct input from from my audience, from my constituents, and that is the girls themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, how am I supposed to have a complete understanding of what young women today are going through and facing? So we created and it's growing, and I see an opportunity to really expand this, and it's actually the foundation of the mentorship program, but is to build a group of female ambassadors who are out telling the story, right?
And these are girls, women
organization.
They've been through or been part of the program and gone through certain aspects of your organization.
So we had, some of them have been involved from the start, right?
Good, yeah.
When we didn't even have anything.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like we just brought some young girls on board and said, hey, we're launching this organization. You're in college. We want your perspective, right? Because we don't want to generate our content or launch our business in a vacuum. So, and they have been incredible.
Yes.
In fact, several of them are now in sales, and they had never even considered a career in sales, but they were just young women who kind of, I thought, yeah, you're the poster child for when I think about young women in sales, and then they become your voice, and they too become your advocates, and they're out there talking about it, and they have it on their LinkedIn, and they're sharing it on social media, and
spreading the movement, right?
Spreading the movement. That's
right.
what it is. It's not, this is not about me.
Yeah.
I just happen to have spearheaded it and had the privilege of being, the fire starter, but now let's just let it spread.
Yeah, I think that is the key about building a movement and how you've been able to get others on board. These women, these girls and women that have been involved with it from the beginning or wherever they came into it, in the process, they've had positive experiences and positive outcomes. And so letting them do the talking for you, don't have to say anything. They're out there talking about it for you. And that spreads the message and gets other women interested, other girls interested, and maybe other companies interested, right, in supporting it. So I love the multiple layers that you have in getting people on board, whether it's through sponsorships for companies to be involved in that way, through the girls themselves, through people, men and women on the advisory board, the hashtags that you're using on social media. So you're literally getting everybody that's the key stakeholders, all of those groups involved in building this momentum behind this movement. So it's, like you said, it's not just you putting out content and saying, oh, this is what we're talking about, but it's all these groups kind of singing the same song, but all from all their different perspectives, which is so lovely. And I think it helps it exponentially grow, right? That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, one of the things I hear from entrepreneurs a lot is, when let's say they're a consultant or, you only have a certain number of hours a day.
Right.
It's really hard being an entrepreneur. So I started from the beginning thinking about 3 years from now, right? And so, I thought, well, I don't want to be in a position where I make the business about me, or I'm out there just doing consulting with, or sales consulting with organizations. First of all, there's 100 other people that are doing a great job of that. But, how do you scale that? Of course you add personnel and then you scale it. But as an early stage startup, you're doing everything, right?
Oh, yeah.
So thinking about the long-term vision, and then also, I want this to be global, right? And by the way, we're getting a lot of traction globally. I mean, in India and in Europe and in Canada, and so it's already we're starting to get some brand awareness across the globe. And it's got to be, I can't be in 7 places at once, even though
you have to rely.
Yeah,
you have to rely on these people who have become brand ambassadors, whatever form that takes. Company, advisory board, woman who's been through the program. You have to rely on them to help spread that message.
Right.
Now, what other? You mentioned the app coming up. Are there any other things that you now have in place, or that you are planning to put in place that you can share with us about how you're adding new layers to this? Any other types of
no, I mean, I think now I think, I've actually been told that I may even have too many things, and that, what should I prioritize in terms of, in terms of scaling the company. And so those are the things that I'm focusing on right now. Well, we do have a book deal. So that's coming out in March of next year for International Women's Day. We have 25 women who are going to be co-author contributors to the book. And again, it's sponsored by Girls Who Sell, and put on, but it's all about amplifying the voices of other women in sales.
Heidi, what a great way, though, to again, just focusing. If you just look at our topic that we're talking about here, about getting others on board to help you build this movement, that is how you do that. Like it's a book, but it's sponsored by your organization, and it's got all the stories of these women who are spreading the word about what you're doing through this organization, which then other women are going to connect with and then helps to spread the word. So I love that idea.
Yeah, yep. I mean, those are, some of the things that we're doing. So now, it's just about capital, just to be honest. I mean, that's it. I mean, we're going out with our first cohort the end of this month, 2 weeks. We've got, and again, this is an example of, I'm not just going prime time, right? Like, we've got a group of 10 to 12 young women, college age students that are going through the Explore Sales training program, going to provide us feedback. We'll make some changes, and then we'll roll it out. So that's happening this month. But right now, it's also been an interesting journey as we've been growing, because and this might resonate with other entrepreneurs or early stage startups who are listening, is that sometimes when you're looking at sponsorships or scholarships, but convincing companies to allocate dollars towards your company, or going and pitching your story to potential investors, sometimes it's a chicken and the egg. Well, what's your revenue?
Right.
No, nothing yet.
Zero.
Zero. In fact, negative. And then, or, how many girls do you have enrolled? Well, we're starting that, right? Like, we officially only launched in January, right?
Oh, wow.
Like, the concept, I came up with the company and put the LLC together in October, spent November and December with Deb Boulanger, and actually in Launch Lab. I know she introduced us, but going through and putting the business plan together, she was really instrumental in me helping to sort of define my strategy. But then we initially launched in January, and we had nothing. We literally had nothing. We just had a vision, and we had
January of 2020 or
2021.
Oh my goodness. And you've done, okay. So for everybody who's watching this for an hour later, please go check out Heidi just go to LinkedIn. I mean, if you just go to LinkedIn and you look at Girls Who Sell and you look at everything Heidi's done, you're going to be blown away, because honestly, I thought it had been longer, because I am amazed at what you've been able to do to grow the awareness. Because I also notice this, you've been nominated for the organization have been nominated for different awards and recognitions. Yeah. So out of curiosity, do you submit those, like nominate yourself, or you nominate the organization? Has someone else nominated the organization? How has that worked? Because I've seen you nominated for many, many things.
Yeah, it's a combination.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that, because some women are afraid to nominate themselves. Nominate
yourself.
Nominate yourself. Yes, that's how you build the movement.
Go ahead. Yes. Don't be shy.
Yes.
I just say, if you have an opportunity, go ahead and nominate yourself.
I agree. 100%.
And that's our imposter. That's such a woman thing, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
That's probably a topic for a whole other day.
Right. Absolutely.
But and by the way, I initially started, or over the last year, I was very well known in the BPO industry. I'd been there for 30 years. I'd been at the top of my game, a top 1% producer. I've worked for a lot of large companies. Everybody, I would think, everybody in the BPO industry either knew me or knew of me, right? Mm-hmm. But nobody in this community, this sort of women in sales community, knew me until, all of a sudden Girls Who Sell popped up in January, and everybody's like, who is Girls Who Sell? And who the heck is this Heidi person, right? Like, so seriously. So initially, I was starting to build my own credibility. Not only, did I have a successful career as a woman in B2B sales and this and that, but I started to, win some awards and be featured in some publications, top 50 women. And in the US, and also Stevie Awards. I won 2 gold Stevies this past year. And so that was awesome, right? In terms of beginning to get credibility and build my personal brand. But again, I have now pivoted away from that. And any awards that I'm focused on right now are all about girls.
The organization.
I don't need to do that anymore. I do, but it's always good. I don't want people to get the wrong impression.
But you have the credibility now.
It's an honor, but really, what I want to do is start getting recognition for what we're doing for Girls Who Sell, and that's starting to happen. I mean, we're just nominated as Best New Company of the Year, and so we'll see. You know, hopefully we'll start getting some of these over the finish line. But again, I guess it plays into it's not about me.
But I think
at the end of the day, it's all about the company and the movement.
Yeah, and I think it's a good conversation, because I think that is one of the ways that you can get other people on board your mission and movement is when you nominate yourself or your organization for different recognitions and awards and things like that. People see that, and then they want to help support it, because like you said, they're like, well, what is Girls Who Sell? And the more people know about it, the more you're building credibility, you're building recognition, but also the more people who are aware of what you do, the more you'll be able to, and the easier it will be to get people on board your mission and movement, right? If they don't know about you, then how can you do that? So I think, like you've done, getting your message out there in that way is effective.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, to be honest, I mean, when you're starting out and you're selling a vision, right?
Yes.
It is about you, right? Because you know, that's what, you know,
you're the creator of the vision.
Going to allocate corporate sponsors. Like, why you? Why should I invest in you? Why should I invest in your company? Well, you know, because I've been doing this for you know, and I have the expertise and I have the power, whatever the story is, right? Around, you know, the origin story. And then eventually, you know, it starts to flip, and it becomes, then you have something to show, right? Outside of just, you know, you're not just buying me, but you're buying the results of what the organization has delivered. And that's where it really starts getting meaningful, and those sponsorship dollars start to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Heidi, I mean, you have really blown me away with your story about Girls Who Sell and all that you're doing. I'm blown away by how much you're doing. It's amazing. So share with everybody how, speaking of building your movement and getting people on board with it, share with everybody how they can find you and Girls Who Sell, and where can they find you, like social media, your website, any of that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm obviously always on LinkedIn.
Yes, you are.
Anybody can reach out to me. Heidi Solomon-Orlick, Orlick. So feel free. I'm very accessible. I love to hear from people, and you know, always welcome feedback. So that's the best place. Obviously, we're all over social, so you can visit our website at www.girlzwhosell.com, and that's girls with a Z. Remember to use the Z, GIRLZ, whosell.com. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, all under Girls Who Sell. And yeah, help us join the movement.
Yes, join the movement.
Help us grow.
Yes. Definitely check Heidi out. Heidi, thank you so much for coming on Backstage at Speaking Your Brand, for sharing your story and the story of Girls Who Sell, and also for sharing everything to help people create a movement. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Heidi.